Both of them are done. Women are done settling, men are done trying, and nobody is talking about what actually happens next. You've seen it. Maybe you've lived it. The woman who has everything figured out except why she's still alone. The man who stopped swiping, stopped approaching, stopped caring, and somehow seems happier for it. This isn't a coincidence. This is a pattern. And in 2026, it has reached a point of no return. Here's what nobody will tell you. The dating market didn't just slow down. It split, clean down the middle. Two groups moving in opposite directions, and the gap between them is growing every single day. Stay with me, because what's happening right now is going to reshape everything you think you know about love, relationships, and what the next decade of your life could look like. She deleted her apps again. 5th time in 2 years. She's 38, runs her own business, turns heads when she walks into a room, and she's not heartbroken, she's just tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that comes from trying very hard at something for a very long time and quietly stopping believing it will ever work. She looked across the table and said something I haven't stopped thinking about since. I'm not settling anymore, but I'm also just done. And here's the part that should stop you cold. The men said the same thing, just quieter, just earlier, and without telling anyone. If you've been wondering why dating feels completely broken right now, why the rules changed overnight, why people who seem perfectly fine are choosing to be alone, what I'm about to show you explains everything. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Let's talk about the women first, because their story is the one that gets told, and it deserves to be understood completely before we get to the part that changes everything. Something happened over the last decade, a message that started as genuinely important. You don't have to accept mistreatment. Your needs are valid. Don't shrink yourself for someone who doesn't see you, slowly transformed into something else entirely. Through thousands of hours of content, through algorithms that rewarded outrage and applause, the message quietly shifted from know your worth to anyone who doesn't meet every item on your list is beneath you. The list grew. It became specific. It became public. And it was no longer built from real experience with real men. It was built from a digital composite, a fantasy assembled from the top fraction of a % of men on the entire planet, served to you every day through a screen, until that fantasy started to feel like the baseline. And then a real man, a good one, the kind who wakes up early and works hard and actually means what he says, stood in front of that list, and came up short. Not because he was inadequate, because the measuring stick was designed in a world that doesn't exist. That's the wall. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. The wall wasn't built from confidence. It was built from wounds. And a wall that keeps everything out also keeps you inside. Now, the men. Because this is where the story takes a turn that most people are completely unprepared for. Men didn't disappear from dating overnight. This wasn't a movement, wasn't a decision made on a Tuesday morning. It was an accumulation, date after date after date, where a man brought his actual self to the table and felt, quietly but unmistakably, that it wasn't quite enough. Not in a dramatic way, just in that particular way where you can feel someone is still looking, even while they're sitting right across from you. He tried being vulnerable because he was told that's what women wanted, and the vulnerability was absorbed, and then somewhere along the way used as evidence of weakness. He paid, he showed up, he was consistent, and then one day it ended, not because he did anything wrong, but because the feeling faded. And somehow that was his fault too. How many times does a rational person volunteer for that before they stop volunteering? And here is what makes this different from every other generation. The men who stop trying aren't miserable. They're not in their childhood bedrooms playing video games and spiraling. They're at the gym at 5 in the morning, they're building businesses, they're traveling, they're cooking for themselves and sleeping well and waking up without dread. And when you ask them, honestly ask them, many of them will tell you something that should make everyone pay attention. They're happier, not because they hate women, because they discovered that their baseline happiness is higher outside the dating market than inside it. And once a man makes that discovery, you cannot shame him back in. You cannot guilt him back in. You cannot wait him out. This is not a phase. Now here's where it gets complicated. because both of these things are true at the same time, and the tension between them is exactly what's tearing the dating market apart. Social media handed women a distorted mirror. Every day, the feed delivers men who are simultaneously wealthy, emotionally available, physically exceptional, and endlessly patient. Men who exist in that complete form almost nowhere in real life. And when your reference point for what's normal is the top 1% filtered through an algorithm, the man in front of you, the real one, the one with a regular job and a few insecurities and a genuine interest in your life, starts to feel like a compromise. He's not a compromise. But comparison is a poison that works slowly, and social media handed men a brutal scorecard. Dating apps quantified rejection in a way that previous generations never experienced. A man in 1990 could ask someone out, get turned down, and walk away with his dignity mostly intact. A man in 2026 opens an app and receives, in the form of statistical silence, a very precise message about exactly where he ranks. Absorb that message enough times, and the response is not to try harder. The response is to close the app, and then stop opening it, and then forget it was ever there. Both of these things were done to people by the same machine, and the machine doesn't care about either of them. So what actually happens next? Because that's the question. That's why you're still watching. And I'm going to tell you something that the usual conversation around this topic completely misses. There are 4 places this goes, and depending on which one you're heading toward, your next 5 years look completely different. The first is the permanent solo life. A real portion of people, growing every year, simply never pair up. They build lives that are structurally independent. Solo travel, solo households, friendships that substitute for partnership. For some, this is a genuine choice. For others, it's a default they drifted into without quite deciding. The loneliness inside it is real but manageable. It is a quiet life, and sometimes quiet is enough. The second is the transactional arrangement. Dating becomes openly what it has secretly always threatened to become. 2 people evaluate each other's utility, negotiate terms, and build something that satisfies practical needs without the pretense of deep feeling. You already see it everywhere. Situationships, undefined arrangements, the talking stage that lasts 8 months and goes nowhere. The emotional cost of this one lands differently on different people, and the research is starting to show it lands harder on women in the long run. Not because women are weaker, because women, on average, need the depth of connection more than they've been told it's acceptable to admit. The third outcome is the one nobody talks about: the great sorting. As the burned out and the indifferent stop engaging, what remains on both sides are 2 very different kinds of people. On one end, people who have actually done the inner work, who know what they want and can say it clearly, who have the emotional maturity to let someone else be a full human being with flaws and still choose them. These people find each other. They build something real. They become quietly aspirational to everyone watching from the outside. On the other end, people still operating from behind the armor of old wounds, whose standards are protection disguised as self-respect, who cycle and swipe and arrive at a certain age wondering what went wrong, unable to quite see their own fingerprints on the answer. The sorting is brutal because it is accurate. It reflects character back at you with a precision that nobody prepared you for. The fourth outcome is the correction, the most hopeful, the hardest to predict. The possibility that the dysfunction becomes so visible, so documented, so personally costly, that something actually shifts, that a generation looks at the wreckage of the swipe era and decides to do something different. That vulnerability stops being punished. That consistency stops being called boring and starts being recognized as the foundation of everything that lasts. That men and women stop performing for each other and start being honest about what they actually need. This outcome is possible, but it requires something the entire architecture of social media is designed to prevent: the willingness to be ordinary in front of someone and to let that ordinariness be enough. Before this ends, I need to say something directly to you, not as a lecture, as a mirror.